So welcome back, everyone. After our coffee break, we've had a great morning and looking forward to the afternoon session. My name is Krista Wallachek. I'm chairman of Talengo, and together with Albert Iribarrondo, there he is, delighted to say we're co-founders of the AESC's newest leadership consultancy and executive search global network, TGCL. One of the things that I learned from this morning's session was very encouraging, actually. Alec Ross mentioned that his first job was as a night watchman. And Bill, you shared that your first job was as a bouncer, I believe. My first job was mucking out stalls in Virginia's premium horse riding school. So I think that maybe there's a future for me. Yeah. Moving on, Bill, before the break, offered us 4 recipes for success aligned with organizational health and how leaders' actions can contribute to performance. Delighted to have the face of our clients here this afternoon, who are all looking forward to hear from. People who in their different organizations are responsible for identifying and for attracting that leadership talent. Very briefly, we have with us Deidre Tully. Deidre is Global Head of Talent Acquisition at Johnson & Johnson and actually came from our dark side. She was an executive search before she moved into the corporate world. Jean Taylor at Novartis, who is global strategy for executive search and selection, 25 years in a broader area of talent as well, RPO, also across multiple industries. Welcome. And Robert Crowder, who's with us from Vanguard, where he also leads talent attraction. Very, very excited about Robert's background. We share something which is my favorite space when I'm not doing search, which is music. And I was delighted to see that he's inspiring learning, and also building communities through collaborative music making. That's fascinating. So with no further ado, and please do read their CVs, which are much broader than I just pointed out. This is an absolute luxury, about a century's worth of experience here on this panel. Wow. So again, Bill.
Wow.
How about that? It sounds good. Just divide by 4 and it's okay. Bill, the stage is yours again. Thank you so much.
Let's see if I can stand here. I'm going to angle this way and also give me a better profile for all those cameras. Okay, opening question. What the hell is going on in the Republican Party? Now, wouldn't that be a good 40 minutes, right? Okay, sorry. Brian, just for a second, I thought I was waiting for Brian to throw his coffee mug at me. All right. So, I'll tell you. Yeah, let's just save that for drinks. Okay. Here's the opening toss-up for 10 points. What are your top challenges, and how does talent relate to it? Now, that's the toss-up. We're going to get into cool stuff like how does health play in, how do we pick, what's changing, what's happening. But I need to give them the obligatory toss-up. Go ahead.
For Novartis, I think the top challenge is looking at integrating multiple divisions around the world into a single cultural organization. This is something that we deal with on a regular basis. For those of you who are partnering with us now to do executive searches, thank you and bless you. We know that we're not the easiest client in the world to work with, and all of the dynamic changes that we make on a regular basis as a part of our culture drive a consistent look at how we do things so that we develop leaders who will then be able to run the company. So I would say that's our single greatest challenge, and it's baked into the culture of the organization. I think, how does talent play into that? It creates a challenge for us ongoing to strategize about where that talent comes from as we evolve who we are as an enterprise and move away from who we are as individual companies, Alcon, Sandoz, Novartis Pharma, NIBR, those kinds of organizations. The talent landscape for us and the competencies and skills that we're looking for in partnership with you are changing to accelerate what we need to do for our patient base. So that's what I would say from a Novartis perspective.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out that part of the hemorrhaging of talent that I was talking about.
You said you were not going to tell.
That's right.
Dang,
It's, thanks to Novartis poaching an ongoing stream of McKinsey partners. How about you?
All right, so as I think about that question, I would say that Vanguard has been around for 40 years, and for most of that time, it's been the insurgent chasing after everyone, and now it's become the industry leader. in so many ways. And I think that culturally there's a little bit of a difference that happens once you go from being the one who's chasing everybody else to being the one who's out in front. And in those 40 years, we've only had 3 CEOs. So when you talk about a very tight and defined culture, without a whole lot of change, that culture stays pretty much intact. So this is the smallest large company that I've ever worked for. So when I think about my challenges, sometimes I think we wind up looking at way too many people, looking for that cultural fit where we pass up on people that might be able to add value. So trying to reduce cycle time, because our growth and the way that we continue to grow requires us to have a little bit more speed. So I would say that that's one thing that I'm challenged with. And then the other thing is, in the financial service industry, there's not a whole lot of diversity. So again, how do we continue to populate our senior ranks with more and more diversity that looks like the marketplace that we serve?
Right, gotcha. Deirdre?
Thank you. So first, I just want to thank whoever put together the program, because I have received a promotion. Thank you, thank you all. So just to be clear, I actually do have the purview of global executive recruiting at Johnson & Johnson, not the whole swath. So for J&J, first of all, I joined there 18 months ago because of such an iconic brand that has had such standing in the world of healthcare for the last 140 plus years. But I think what we've become increasingly knowledgeable about is the consumer demographic is changing. The world of healthcare is changing, and how do we keep up with that? So for us, historically, we have always prided ourselves on a very decentralized business model and really respecting what is different between the consumer business versus our med device versus healthcare. But what we have increasingly heard is, number one, we're no longer challenged to sell products, individual products to individual hospitals. We're challenged to sell solutions, healthcare solutions, to hospital systems. So how do we do that? How do we leverage much more strongly, very similar to what you were saying, the power of the one J&J brand and leveraging that in the market, and then always understanding behind that, where do we need to have really those key differentiated strategies by business by business. So what does that mean from a talent perspective? I think we have a tremendous history of building talent from within, so much so that up until my arrival, we had never even had an executive recruiting function at J&J. So to put that in context for you, we have about 125,000 plus employees around J&J. Back in the year 2012, of those, about 1,400 were considered our executive population. And that year, we only recruited 21 external people from the external executive market. And what we've realized is that to be able to meet those challenges of that changing demographic is that we have to rethink that buy versus build strategy. So that's actually why I was brought in to help do that, is to really think about, because we started to worry, right? We surrounded ourselves by people who thought J&J speak, who weren't challenging convention. So what does that mean for diversity in all shapes, sizes, forms, industries, fresh perspective, as well as innovation? And we know that having diverse workforce is a key to driving innovation. So that's really our challenge right now, is finding the right balance between buy versus build, respecting what's great about this 140-year-old culture, but recognizing we now have to think about things very differently than we've ever thought of them before.
Great, thank you. Each of you mentioned fit in a different way, certainly in the multi-businesses under big brands and in the sort of growing and only a few CEOs. But I think I met the last one. It went well, thankfully. But how do you manage fit when you're talking about what these folks help you with in terms of selection? Is it just culture matters? Do you get really specific? Like how do you help get a little bit more precise in your cases for which business it is, and in your case with just the strength of the firm and the brand?
Go ahead.
Just dive in, anyone.
That's a really hard question when you're doing what Novartis is doing. And for those of you who follow us, we've sold off 4 divisions in 24 months length of time. We've partnered with Google to develop some of the most innovative technologies in human eyesight in the world. We've done a great many things that help us deliver quality life changing services, whether it's cancer or vision or any one of the disease states that we treat to the world. So when we're talking about fit, that is a changing reality. It's why, from a strategic perspective, our interest in partnering with firms like yourselves is deepening and broadening. We look to you to consult with us and to partner with us to help us be sure that what we're choosing from a fit perspective is in light of where we're going. So to Deirdre's point, it's kind of an interesting thing in Novartis. Novartis is roughly 20 years old this year. Alcon, a division that was purchased in 2010, is 70 years old this year. So when you talk about fit for organization that was organically grown, much like Deirdre described to J&J, and Novartis, which is very differently grown, very dynamic, very innovative in the way that it, over the 20 years, has used technology to define fit, used different kinds of tools to define fit. And then you toss in Sandoz, that's a generics manufacturer, generics presence in the world, arguably among the top 3. Now it's in biosimilars, so fit, right? Fit. We want exportable talent at the general manager level around the world. So we are using some of the modeling kinds of techniques and technologies that Bill referenced really tongue-in-cheek earlier, like who needs a standardized interview set of questions? Who needs any kind of assessment tools? Well, we do, and we're using them very, very faithfully at the executive levels. We are on a very real course to lay those things down at more junior levels, so at the mid-management level, so that we're sure what we're looking at are the skills and competencies that are going to help us do what we need to do as we become the life science industry of the future. So it's kind of a moving target.
Great, thank you.
So I would say at Vanguard, everybody who's part of the interview slate is very much a cultural ambassador as well as a guardian. So it's very much protected. And again, being around as long as we have, so one thing that's kind of unique about Vanguard is that we don't have a profit motive and we don't have owners. So in essence, the people who own our funds, the funds own Vanguard. So in essence, those who own the funds own Vanguard. So we have no other people that wind up getting any type of profit out of Vanguard. And what we do is pour that back into lower prices for the investor, because our whole reason for existing is to be able to drive and make sure that that investor that's invested their money keeps the most of that money so that they can have the best chance for investment success. So we're a bit of a different company where it's not a profit-driven motive and it's more about this mission that we're a part of. And in the financial services industry, it's really hard to find people that aren't driven by their own profit, wealth, and well-being and buy into that mission. But it's pretty easy to be able to flesh that out during the course of an interview if, in fact, you're kind of aligned with that mission or not. Another thing that probably is a very visible and obvious thing is that we really value confidence with humility. So that combination of confidence and humility is another characteristic or trait from a cultural standpoint that's really critical for success at Vanguard. So if it's about you, if it's about me, if it's about what I can do, that's going to be something that's going to derail you and not allow you to be very successful in the organization as well. And being able to make other people around you better. So again, I want to succeed, but I want the organization to succeed more than I want myself to succeed. So there is this focus on developing your crew, and we refer to all of our employees as crew members. So it's about developing that crew, it's about managing that crew, and helping to make everyone who's around you better. So there are some very visible and measurable things that we look for as we're going for that cultural match, but it's scarce in the marketplace, which sometimes makes it pretty difficult for us.
What I said before was about this very decentralized business model that we have at J&J and trying to think more of one J&J. So even though with that decentralized business model at J&J, what I think about when I say fit, when you say fit, is very much what we refer to as our credo at J&J. So those of you who have been around J&J or have read about us, I'm sure you've heard about it. It was created back in 1940. It stayed with us through all these years, and it really speaks to saying our first commitment is to our doctors, nurses, patients, mothers and fathers. Next commitment is to our employees. Next level is communities. And last on that is actually shareholders. And the whole idea behind that is if you stay true to these first items, that you will naturally return investment dollars to your stakeholders. Now, with that said, I think that when And we also have brought in on our leadership model, we've worked a lot with Korn Ferry, their PDI division, to build in an executive assessment. So for both internals and externals who are being considered for internal or bringing in externals, we do an executive assessment to see how do they kind of stack up when we think about the J&J way around both leadership as well as cultural fit. I will tell you, I get a little bit nervous, to be quite honest, because what I was talking about before was we are on this journey to really change, to bring in more external talent, to challenge the status quo. And a lot of times you want someone who is going to be a little bit of an out-of-the-box thinker, right? So if we say we want to bring in innovation, we want people to challenge, but yet we constantly screen for people who look like us and who will instantly fit into our culture, like that's a very tense situation, right? And also I think sometimes fit, when you say fit, like how does that play against diversity, about inclusion, particularly going back again to innovation? So it's something that we're watching really, really closely because we do have a very specific culture, but as I said, in many ways, we want to challenge that culture, but we also don't want to have organ rejection later either, right? So I say I want it, I bring it in, 9 months, the body of J&J rejects it and pushes it out because that's a very high cost, inefficient way to grow your business and your talent agenda.
Yeah, I was listening to your reflections on that and then thinking about some of the insidiousness of fit gone wild, right? So in McKinsey, I'm sure many of you who know us, I mean, partners actually do involve themselves, not as much in recruiting. We have a recruiting machine. It's actually incredibly expensive for us to turn that on because of the on-campus stuff. But the hiring part, partners see everyone. Like each look, we won't hire anyone until a group of partners has done it. So if you consider how many people we're hiring each year, that's a pretty big investment. The two biggest things we do non-client service are hiring and appraisal. So I still have 10, and I rotate every 2 years, go back to new associates. I have 10 first or second year associates who are mine that I talk to everyone who runs the studies they work on. Twice a year we evaluate them and whatever. That's just, we invest in that part of the machine, right? But this fit part, about 2.5 years ago, right when we started getting into the people analytics stuff, we were faced with the reality that for all of our rhetoric around women, we were horrible at it, right? That was the reality, right? We just could not keep really talented women who, when we hired them, were the smartest people in their classes, and we couldn't keep them, right? And so, yes, we've done this stuff with Lean In, and we've, published the Why Women Matter stuff, but our rhetoric was outstripping the reality, right? So we went back and looked at the people who were doing the interviewing of our associates. We have a candidate database, which for those of you, I'm sure you have this as well, the candidate database is the unmined gold mine of data. So you figure out what works, you go back to the candidate database and you see who you didn't hire. In our case, a couple little things that jumped out, which were kind of interesting. 60% of our offers were going to 10% of our core schools. That means we were taking 75 at Wharton instead of number 3 at Bryn Mawr, which was just stupid. Mm-hmm. Right? We were going to the same sources, right? That was one. Second, we started tagging people who were early washouts. And then we went back and looked at who recommended them for hire. They don't interview for us anymore. There's that. There's that too. Some of them might not even be part of the firm anymore, but that's a different discussion. But this idea of the people who are seeing their view of fit, you were talking about cultural ambassadors, right? I'm curious as to, how can this group of people help you and help us in terms of intervening maybe a little farther upstream, right? And so, what you're looking at, how you're looking at it, and how can they tease out what fit looks like, what's an acceptable stretch versus what would be an organ donor rejection. And I'm certain I'd fill your, what was that, humility? There's no way I'd pass that bar. So how can they help?
You got the confidence.
Well, or stupidity, one or the other.
I think for me it comes down to, the difference between good and great in executive search. So I think, good recruiters come in, they understand the business strategy, and they help you deliver on it. They, I don't want to say take the order, right? But you write out the ticket, you know exactly what they're looking for, and you don't push, right? And I think for us, we're at a spot when we bring you in, we need you to push us, to make us better. And I often see my job is to make sure that you kind of have the safe haven to do that, right? Because, once again, I think oftentimes, where the rubber meets the road is bringing in that one new executive. And how is that one person, that key for us, we think about it as one person at a time, one person closer to curing cancer, one person closer to, AIDS virus, et cetera. So how do we partner to where when we bring you in, that you're not only a great recruiter, but you understand our business strategy and our talent agenda and are going to push us to make the right call in every way, shape, and form. So, not just helping us deliver what we say we want, but helping us understand what we truly need and how does that resonate or not in the talent market.
One thing that we've started doing at Vanguard is actually inviting the firms on campus, because there's much about culture that you can't articulate in words, that you have to see, that you have to feel, that you have to experience. So we've started inviting some of our search firms on site to be able to, again, walk around campus, to be able to see how people interact with each other, have them sit down with the business and be able to talk about, again, what are some of the goals or the strategies as a business and how they would define their the culture of that, the subculture, but there's a dominant culture that goes through everything. And then we actually have them sit down with new hires, a couple of new hires that have been hired so that they can see what success looks like also. And many times when these people have come from someplace other than Vanguard, there are things that jump out immediately, such as, boy, I didn't realize this relationship thing that they talk about. When we first come to a meeting, if I don't know everybody, it's about, so let's go around the room and just everybody introduce yourself. Tell me your Vanguard story. That's an important thing. And if you don't do that, people will view you not being as relationship oriented. But again, those are things that sometimes the new person will be able to tease out, that somebody who's been there for a long time would never ever be able to articulate that. And by doing that, it helps the firms be able to better identify people that would be a good match that might not have been a part of an intake discussion.
Gotcha, thank you.
I think for us, the things that you all do as professionals that are most important are knowing the industries that we're engaging you on. We are counting on you to be able to find that 29-year-old person Bill referred to. And we know that's your expertise, right? So define and look to build your own businesses with people who can backfill you. Train them properly. Have them not only be your advocate and your analyst, but help them understand compensation plans and internal equity so that they are prepared to be the next leader in your firm. We're not looking to divorce ourselves from the partnership that we have with you. We're counting on you to show us that you are doing what we're asking you to help us do, because we're partners. We're not looking at you as a vendor, right? And in that partnership, that's something that's very important to me in the role that I've created and now taken in Novartis, is that our review of performance is not Novartis looking at how many candidates you brought us or how many of them were diverse candidates or those kinds of things. Those are poker chips for the game, right? What we're doing now is we're looking at you to say, help us define our diversity strategy, both from Alex's comments at the board level all the way down to selections of firms that we're buying. So I think the most important thing we do as partners together is act like that. And one of the key things that I'm asking the business to do with me is, instead of doing a traditional vendor evaluation, is we will begin doing 360-degree evaluations of our partnership in selecting talent around the world. So we'll be inviting you, when you're doing search work with us, to evaluate whether our leaders showed up, whether you got the right role profiles, whether you got the right compensation information. Because what I find in my initial analysis of our work is that you bring us very good candidates early in the process, and then we spend a long time trying to close that deal. That's something that we need to get around, or we're not meeting, to Deirdre's point, the service of the patients that we all want to affect.
Yeah, and I would add to that, because I think that's so important. When I first got to J&J, I was literally, so we are not a high volume client. We still do not hire a lot from the external market. We have started doing a lot more of, we really wanted to test our leaders' talent muscle, right? Did they promote from within just because it's what they've always done and it's their comfort zone? Or were they really doing it because we believe we have the strongest succession pipeline in place? So we have started doing a lot more work around talent market analysis, around really having a competitive process for any of our key openings, where we look kind of internal and external, the best executive wins. And when I looked at the volume, once again, still low, we were working with way too many firms, to be quite honest with you. They were one-off engagements. And to me, that was a transaction, right? So what I've been working to do is how do I narrow and deepen that portfolio to get exactly to what you're talking about? Because I don't want to start from zero every time I kick off a search. And I don't even want to bring you in when I'm kicking off a search. I want to have been having that conversation with you months and months ago when we first started realizing that we had vulnerability in that succession pipeline. So, and I think that you have to kind of hold us to it. So, okay, you say you want it. Do you really want it? And keep us honest in that. Because I think the partnership is so important.
Robert, pile on there.
Well, the only thing I would say would be, in addition to that, with the succession plan and the gaps, is that when you get to know us, because again, our relationships wind up being longer-term relationships with our search partners versus transactions, and that's why we invest the time to bring you in and make sure you do that. One of the things we actually value is that once you get to know the culture, as you identify people that fit that mold, because again, of the scarcity of it, we want you to be a partner and be able to share that talent with us at times, because 3 things have to be true in order for a hire to take place. It's got to be the right person, the right time, and the right opportunity. And if all 3 of those things are not true at the same time, it just doesn't happen. So there are times where you might have identified the right person, and just bringing it to our attention, we might be able to do some things to be able to make that happen. But again, being aware of this scarce resource, something that's not always going to be a great, that somebody is a great fit for us culturally, making us aware of that and playing that role of being kind of the pipelining mechanism for us is something that's of value.
It's pretty good, right? So a lot of head nodding on that one. Everyone here is getting very excited, dutifully taking notes about who they're talking to. Go ahead.
Question. The industry's got better, and our industry's got better and better at spending time and investing time.
Can you guys hear him? Let me get it. Hold on.
Somebody
We have a
needs
handheld in the back.
microphone. Yeah.
Right here. There we go.
Thanks. Our industry's got a lot better at investing time and creating partnership in advance of hires. What we still struggle to do well is spend time after the hire. Karen talked about onboarding and a demand for our clients of us to onboard better. How critical do you see the search and consulting industry in making onboarding part of the process, a critical part of the longevity of hires?
So my immediate thought on that is that sometimes the failure in onboarding is people not getting a feedback loop quick enough to be able to adjust their behavior. And if people don't wind up giving them feedback, they get put on the island, which causes them to wind up failing. So sometimes the relationships at the beginning with the recruiting firm or the recruiter are sometimes the most strong and trusting relationships so far. And for the firm to be able to maybe get some of those early notices about the way something might be going wrong, or getting that feedback that it can get addressed or get fixed, is of great value, because you're not necessarily going to ask your boss about that, because you're still trying to demonstrate that I've got this. But there is a trusting relationship with that search consultant that being able to leverage that can provide us with the opportunity to create a better feedback loop that might help somebody be more successful.
I think to dovetail on what he's talking about, some of the knowledge that you collect in the search process that may fall off of the candidate summaries that you're preparing, some of that intuitive knowledge, because a great many of the candidates that you bring to us in all of the firms that we represent are people that you've known for some time, right? Or someone in your firm has known for some time. Helping us in the consultative conversations prepare for what may be in our firms robust onboarding programs or different onboarding programs depending on where in the world people are actually going is very helpful. It's much more on the art side to follow up on what Alec was talking about than on the science side. And I think that I agree with him, having spent 10 years in executive search myself at the beginning of my career, is the part that will never go away from the deliverable of our search partners. So a little bit more on the soft side, a little bit more on the art, bring that stuff up to say, if you're going to put this guy on an island, right, and he's not going to have all of the influence of being at a hub inside your organization, these are things that we've seen over time, and we may want to embed this unique kind of deliverable into the onboarding plan. If we can help you do that, good. If we just need to get out of the way because you've got it prepared, good. We just want to make you aware of it. very helpful and probably an iterative step to take in toward the development of things that your firm is particularly good at.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I mean, I'm a little bit opinionated on this topic that I don't think most companies do really good onboarding with their new executives. I think most companies probably do it pretty well with earlier career when you're about teaching technical skills and all of that kind of stuff. I think in executive, we often make the tragic mistake of assuming, well, we hired them because they have a great track record and know how to do this job. And then we bring them in and say, go forth, prosper. And I think that, what we oftentimes miss is that, they know how to do the job, they don't know how to do it here. And we are a very highly complex organization and very relationship oriented, not process driven. So it's not like I can hand you a chart and tell you who to call for what and get anything done. And then you take into account that you're one of the very few executives that we're going to bring in that year and have brought in the last 10 years. It's really tough. So I have a great respect for the amount of information and relationship building that you do with your candidates, because most of the time this is not someone that you met just in the course of this search. This is someone that you have known for a very, very long time. So how do we appreciate the fact that when they come to us, they are still the most sticky to you? They haven't become sticky to us yet. So how do we take everything that we've collected throughout that entire interview process, assessment process, background process, reference checking process, put that information together and then figure out how to start translating that into the new organization where the executive's going. And I think it's not just, okay, I collect a bunch of stuff and hand it to you. It's a longer tail process. So I don't have the magic answer, but I think it's a recognition on both of our sides that your job can't end the minute that candidate hits their start date. That we have to think and we have to be mindful, and maybe it's on figuring out on case by case, is working with the clients, working on your end to figure out how do we have that longer tail. And I know that the practice usually in executive search is that you call at a predefined after their start date and see how's it going. But even that, I don't think that's enough. And I think on both sides we kind of have to appreciate that there's more work to be done there, but it probably starts with the conversation and being aware of it in every single engagement and every single hire.
I do wonder, for those of you who do serial placement, if you're not sitting on a treasure trove of intel on what it's like to place into one of these places, and actually that your briefing pack is unique to your knowledge and maybe it should be shared. I end up on the other side of this, spend a fair bit of time with clients where we look at their resource planning and their mix of make and buy, and particularly for the buy part, then go to folks like you and say, do you think of poaching for them? If yes, why or why not? Or if no, why not? And what's it like to put there? What kind of success have you had? It is interesting. I suspect you're sitting on a huge amount of information that become, here's how we raise the likelihood of success. If we know that onboarding is a number one source of failure, then why not use the information you likely have latently, explicitly? As an aside, at least it would work for us. I mean, certainly you guys know us quite a bit. But, our placement rate in McKinsey is horrific, right? I mean, we are really, really poor at bringing on experienced hires. Yes, ma'am.
So I think all of us in this room, after we complete a search, are very committed to our candidate's success. But we don't speak to these candidates after they start, maybe more than once every, I don't know, like the first month, and then of course maybe 2 to 3 months later. And it's very much baked into the contract that we have with our client. And last year, I had placed a chief HR officer at a very difficult culture and founder-led, very hard to navigate. I knew all the partners, I knew the principal, and they hired me under a separate contract to do coaching because I have a coaching practice as well. And that just completed after 12 months. And I will say, I don't think the candidate would have survived during those first 12 months because I had in the moment access as things were happening where, we could get together, and I got feedback 3 times during the year And so that contract is over, and they're still a client of mine. But the point is that I don't think the corporate side thinks that way. They don't think of a separate contract, and yet we who do the search actually know the partners, we know all the players, we know the organization, so that we can help them to navigate. So the better we know our clients, the more effective we can be. But the corporate side hasn't thought about onboarding in that way.
Gotcha. So I want to pick up on this one to think about it. And the last softball I teed up for you beforehand was said, let's get to that question about a lot of these firms, search and advisory or consultancy, and that was sort of speaking to that, a bit of both. Your thoughts on doing both, the viability of doing both, why you would or would not go that way, right? And okay, we're going to start with you because your face was evident to everyone in the room. So we're
I've
just going
got
to lead
no
off with you.
poker face, just to be clear. No poker face, except all candidates always think I like them. I really have mixed feelings about this. We come to you because we expect you to be deep in knowing that talent market, understanding our business strategy, our aligned talent strategy, and knowing how to deliver on that. And that's really, really, really important. And I think, once again, my opinion, a lot of where I saw search firms starting to diversify from that was really when the financial markets tanked and your search business went down. So a lot of it, I think, when you first started seeing this diversification, was driven by kind of figuring out different ways to be inventive in the market. And how do you leverage this distinct competence in the talent, knowledge, assessment, delivery to be able to do that? So I understand kind of the core that runs across the various services that search firms are building out today. But I guess my check is always, I want to go with a firm that I think they're the best in an area. So I respect that there might be some play between it, but don't go so far from your base that you lose kind of your ability to deliver in that core area that is so, so, so important. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. Clearly I said before, we work with Korn Ferry's assessment division. We also work with Korn Ferry's executive search division. But we actually specifically put a Chinese wall between the two, to be quite honest, to help avoid any conflict of interest. Because on the client side, when we're thinking about that, we're also thinking about it with that mindset as well. So I think I appreciate it. I get a little nervous about it. It's not an automatic, yes, that makes great sense to me.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
So I think I'm a little opinionated also, and I think that there are certain services that just seem to have just an inherent conflict that just don't go really well together. So for as a client, to have you do the assessment as well as doing the search almost seems like you're giving the keys to the wolf to watch the hen house. It just seems really difficult for those two things to be able to operate completely separate from one another without the common good of the firm being there. And again, whether it's true or not, that's the perception from the client side, that those two things, I just can't trust one or the other. But there are other services. So, you gave the example of an additional contract to be able to help with the coaching or the onboarding. Now that would be something that, why not make that a normal part of your engagement versus it being a separate contract? That would be something that would be a value add to a placement with your firm, that you do this also and have that embedded in the normal contract versus it being an add-on or a different type of arrangement. And I think that as a client, I would be open to something like that would allow me to be able to have that tag on as part of the original engagement that we had with you to be able to help make sure that was successful. So that one seems to be one that makes sense to me.
I think we're at the other end of the spectrum. I think one of the reasons that we want to partner with you is because you're members of the AESC. Having been a member early in my career and really respecting the deliverables that were offered to me then at that time, and looking at the change in the AESC over the course of the past couple of years under particularly Karen's leadership and the direction of the new board, and we're really very pleased with the kinds of commitments that firms are making. So I do clearly understand that when you have multiple divisions in your firms, there are firewalls between them. We use a great many of the services in concert with the executive search services. I'm not worried about those kinds of things at all because I know that you have a measure of integrity and commitment to the industry. You've thought about this very carefully. Your lawyers have vested this kind of a consideration in the market. You spend billions of dollars to do it. And so we are going to lean in with you to figure out and to ask you, again, as our partners with that 360, if you think that there's an opportunity for us to separate things because there may be a perception of a lack of integrity, then let us do that together. But I think the fact that you are in this space and you are spending this money and you're committing yourselves to being partners with us to bring us what we need, something that is richer and deeper and more elaborate and quite frankly more elegant, the Novartis enterprise applauds that and is very grateful for the deliverables that you're bringing to us.
And the one thing to cap on that, because I don't want to come off as, my concern about it really comes down to, I want my search partners to be specialists and not generalists across the talent spectrum. So if you can figure out a way to bring a distinct competence in each one of those areas as it tries to being all things to all of your clients, then yes, I'm in favor of that. I just think in certain cases in my experience, it has seemed like it's trying to be more generalists as opposed to really owning the specialty model, which I think once again is so critical.
Okay, everyone here, when you saw them crossing it out, said specialist in, generalist out. Okay, we're at 27, right? We're going to end at 30? 3 minutes? One last question for anyone? No one? You don't really want to ask about it? Is everyone booking a flight to Texas to talk to
They're
Alcon?
all trying to get out of here.
Okay, I don't think we have anything else. No? Thank you to our panel.
Thank you all.